Good afternoon and welcome to the February meeting of the Murfreesboro Historic Zoning Commission. Brenda, would you please call the roll?
Yes. Linda Anderson.
Here.
Gib Backlund.
Here.
David Becker.
Here.
Deborah Belcher.
Here.
Rick Cantrell. Paul Cross.
Here.
Jim Thompson.
Here.
Mary Mae White. Here. Howard Wilson.
Here. We do have a quorum, so I call this meeting to order. Everyone should have received minutes of the last meeting. Are there any necessary additions or corrections?
I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes as submitted.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor of accepting the minutes as written, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? No. Robert, we have an agenda today with three particular items. If we could start perhaps with the third bulleted item, the proposal to amend the Murfreesboro City Code.
Sure. Chairman Thompson and Historic Zoning Commission members, this item on the agenda is a proposal to amend the Murfreesboro City Code, Appendix A, the zoning ordinance, Section 24, and it's titled H1 Historic District. Excuse me. Over the past several months, we've been tossing back and forth how we're going to deal with public improvements inside the city's historic zone. We've had some special meetings. We've had some proposals to change the ordinance. And with the help of the city attorney, we've come up with a draft proposal, and it's been submitted to you at the last meeting, and it was included in the agenda package. We're here to discuss this and take appropriate action as you seem necessary. In the agenda package, I copied word for word the proposal. I highlighted at the request of one of the commission members part of the proposal. We're here today to discuss that.
Thank you. Mrs. McGannon, would you like to address the commission on anything regarding this?
I'd be happy to respond to questions. I really don't know that I have anything to add from the discussion we had at your last session, since the language hasn't changed. Again, it was an attempt to address the concerns that had been expressed by members of the Commission and the public, and to prevent a reoccurrence of problems while maintaining the city's ability in emergency situations to do that which is necessary, but to allow for input on occasions when that is within above the surface of the land and public property, and to have the timing of that consultation be such that it could contribute meaningfully to any city planned work or work of a utility or other governmental entity. As we previously talked about, the ability of this ordinance to control what some utilities do may be questioned, but it certainly states the city's public policy should this group wish to recommend it to the Planning Commission for their input and forwarding to the City Council.
Great, thank you. Anyone on the Commission would like to ask any questions or make comments?
Mr. Chairman, I don't have any questions, but I do feel that it meets the requirements that we were trying to achieve with the having consultation even on enhancements for changes made to the public right-of-ways within our zone. And it's obvious that not only this written request change, but the goodwill of the city to come forward to the Commission with the other two bullet items on the agenda today, I think the system is working.
Great. Anyone else?
I have one comment relative to the last statement that's in bold. It says consultation may be requested or provided even if it is not required as herein specified. How would we know as a Historic Zoning Commission, for example, if the sewer department were to be doing excavations in an area that potentially had archaeological sites in that vicinity, which obviously we would want to comment on? how would we be afforded the opportunity to make comments on that? There's no specific provision that we be notified of anything that's being done subsurfacely. And I'm just curious as to how you, in a very well-thought and well-constructed amendment, would see us being made aware of that.
That was an example that had come up in our prior discussions. I guess my assumption had been if we already had a street there or a sewer there, the likelihood that there would be a historic find of, potential significance that members of the commission would know about and the Water and Sewer Department wouldn't, would seem to be unlikely. But because I think there was considerable concern expressed by members of other city departments that if it was something like that, replacement of a sewer, it just really didn't make a lot of sense to have the additional step of coming to historic zoning before that could be accomplished. I think generally what was intended by the last sentence were such things as say the Manny Avenue project was not actually within the boundaries of the district, but was in its immediate vicinity, that would be the sort of situation where either staff, as I think the city manager committed he would do, might bring to you. Again, that would be a situation where it wouldn't be required, but it might be sought, or conversely, in that same hypothetical, if he had not made that commitment, and it became a matter of public knowledge to members of the commission, they could ask for a presentation or input. So the last sentence was intended to give some flexibility for the situations that may not be directly covered, where it could either be initiated by the city or could be initiated by members of the commission on something that consultation would be required but could be provided. So the last sentence was intended to, cover the unusual circumstances. The example you gave might be one. If there was knowledge on the member's part that there might be some, historic site subsurface that wasn't generally known, either in terms of public attention to projects that the city is going to do, which come up at meetings, Water and Sewer Board, City Council, newspaper accounts, that information would be shared.
I do appreciate that language in particular, and I guess the statement that I want to make is that it's incumbent upon the members of this board to be cognizant of what else is going on inside the city, of projects that are relative to the historical areas that we have some responsibility on, to be watching out for that, because that gives us the opportunity to request information. And I think it's a very thoughtful and well-constructed sentence that's been applied at the end of this language to give this commission the opportunity to step in if we're paying attention to what's going on. And I just didn't know whether they're I assume that when I realize that most city projects have to have some sort of approval by the council or the planning commission or the Water and Sewer Board before they proceed. Although I know there are some situations where emergencies arise and things have to be done, but I do appreciate that sentence at the end of that, because I think it gives us latitude to raise questions where we might not otherwise see the opportunity to do that.
Anyone else have any questions or comments? I, for one, wanted to ask, because I'm an architect by profession and not a lawyer, so I don't know how to write or read ordinances sometimes, but it says in the next to last sentence, which does not materially change its size, appearance, or function. What does materially change mean to you?
Something that would, a reasonable person would view as being a difference. If it's changing something from a 6-inch pole to a 4-foot pole, that would be material. Whether 6-inch to 8-inch would be material, I think, might be somewhat questionable. I don't think with all of the things that are in the street that this commission has expressed interest in, that it would be possible, as we have done with signs, for example, in the sign ordinance, to say no more than 15%, because you could have something that would be, say it would be streetlights. If the city suddenly decided to paint them hot pink, okay? I think that would be a material change, though they wouldn't have changed in size at all, or fluorescent orange or whatever. So I think it is a judgment call, and it will take some period of city staff coming and Historic Zoning Commission, providing input to make sure that there's a common understanding. I did not think it would be appropriate or successful, frankly, to include every change. There has to be a de minimis, ability, but it couldn't be without some qualification, and that was the word that seemed to me to be most appropriate. If you say significant, that implies a value judgment, so to speak, that it would be an easier standard for city staff to ignore the commission than I think you intend. I think material, that is a word that is used with some frequency in drafting legal documents. For the reasons I've outlined, it is something that people can apply common sense to, and a reasonable, prudent person would recognize something as being immaterial or material.
The reason I asked that, I just want to make sure that since you addressed the issues of size, appearance, and function, but not the word material, I wanted to make sure that materially changed meant what I assumed was like why we're here today, where it went from brick to concrete. That's a material change, but I wanted to make sure materially changed if that was some definition different than that, what I consider to be a reasonable understanding. I want to make sure it wasn't different than what you intended.
Yeah, no, I think I was focusing not on materials, but degree of change.
Okay.
Ms. McGannon, my understanding is then this amendment is, as proposed, is to be submitted to the Planning Commission. Is that correct?
Right, because it's part of the zoning ordinance, and we take all land use ordinances to the Planning Commission. Even if the Planning Commission should reject it and say they don't want to do that, you would still have the ability to take it to the City Council. But they get to do thumbs up or thumbs down on it if it has to do with land use regulation. That's a matter of state law rather than city preference.
Mr. Chairman, I would move that this motion, as constructed, that this commission recommend to the Planning Commission that it be that the zoning ordinance of the City of Murfreesboro be amended to include this language as constructed by Ms. McGannon.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any further discussion regarding this proposed amendment? If not, all those in favor of the amendment as written, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Well, thank you very much. I appreciate this very much. Robert, we might start then with our first bullet then regarding the replacement of the sidewalk on the west side of South Highland.
Sure, Chairman Thompson. This agenda item is a proposal to remove and replace the existing concrete sidewalk which is located on the east side of South Highland Avenue. That should be the west side, I think, isn't it?
It's been corrected to the west side on the
West side of East Main, from East Main Street to East Vine Street. The city is preparing to replace this section of sidewalk due to the deterioration of the concrete. And Mr. Chris Griffith, who's the city engineer, he's here to walk you through the process and show you some examples or show you the conditions out there and what's going to be proposed. This, like Mrs. McGannon was talking about, this is a routine maintenance project that may or may not be included on our agenda item if it comes up again in the future. But we wanted to bring this to you now just to show you that what the city is intending to do in this in the historic zone. Mr. Griffith, if he's here, yeah, he's here. He'll get another presentation to do.
Great. Mr. Griffith, if you would please address the audience and state your name.
Yes, sir. My name is Chris Griffith. I'm the city engineer for the city of Murfreesboro. I appreciate Chairman Thompson and members of the Historic Zoning Commission being able to present these the following two items for your information. The first item, as was mentioned, is the replacement of sidewalk along the west side of Highland Avenue. The existing sidewalk, and by the way, I've provided a letter for both of these items in your at your desk prior to the meeting. The existing sidewalk on the west side of South Highland Avenue from East Main Street to Vine Street is in poor condition and in need of replacement. Staff has provided photos of the condition of the sidewalk as well as a site map for your review. Both of those is attached. I've also have on the screen the same photos that you have. If we can now just flip through these periodically. It is the same photos that you have in your package. The street department is planning to remove the existing concrete sidewalk and replace it with a similar concrete sidewalk at the same location. I might add that it would also be at the same width of the existing sidewalk, so pretty much everything will be exactly the same. Currently, this maintenance project is scheduled to begin on Monday, February 22nd of basically next week, of course, with weather permitting. Something that we feel that's a problem, if you'll notice in the pictures, a lot of the sidewalk is uneven. We have some trees that's growing into it. A lot of this occurs, especially if utilities work on overhead lines in these areas. They may set their outriggers up and break, just chip the corners of these. And this is just something that's happened over time. You can see how really we start beginning to be concerned with anything that might roll, wheelchair, really a stroller, anything in these areas that would present a problem for the pedestrians crossing here. With that, and then I think I mentioned also with the tree that's growing in there on the side. We won't do anything with the tree as far as cutting it or anything, but we will. Matter of fact, we'll probably just leave kind of a bump out around that so we can have the sidewalk and the tree kind of living in harmony there. With that said, I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have about this project.
Thank you. What questions does the Commission have of Mr. Griffith?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I don't have a question, but I do have a comment. On our previous discussions, when we had the section of 600 block East Main where we had red bricks that were taken up by the city and replaced with concrete. Really started this whole process about these kind of situations coming in front of us. I would like to make a recommendation that we use stamped brick pavers to replace the broken concrete along that line. Because as you look into the future, currently we have, to the best of my knowledge, we have still a section of red brick on the 300 block, the 400 block of East Main on the north side. And we have a couple sections on North Highland just beyond College Street. And we had hoped as a commission, as we needed to replace things within the historic zone, that we would make that replacement as close to the original red brick as we could. And of course, the red brick pavers is a material that's been approved throughout the city, and as I noticed on the pictures for South Manny project, it looks like there is going to be similar sidewalks there, and I think that would fall into line much more historically versus just putting the old concrete back. So that would be a suggestion from myself in that regard.
I appreciate that, and certainly we are using pavers in some locations, and we get with to the Manny Avenue proposal. I think you'll see that. For the most part, as far as long runs of sidewalk, we've typically replaced those, and I'm just speaking around town in general. We've replaced those with just the concrete for several reasons, but one of which obviously being cost. I think the construction of a brick sidewalk on long runs typically costs about 70% more than what just say a concrete section would cost. But that's certainly something that we could look at and come up with cost analysis on doing that as far as at certain areas where we've been more effective, and where I think where we've been effective in controlling cost and also adding a nice look to the area is using the stamped concrete, the stamped asphalt to accentuate areas, say in plaza areas, which is what we're proposing for the Manny Avenue and for crosswalks also. I think you'll find that's consistent with some of the stuff that we've done recently in the Avenues area, around the conference center, on some of our greenway trails. We've used some stamped asphalt and stamped concrete, and it really adds to the overall look, and it still allows us to control the cost.
Well, I might not have made myself clear, but that's the direction I was going, versus just the plain old gray concrete. They have the stamped concrete, red brick colored.
Sure. And certainly we're always open to suggestions and to ideals, and we appreciate your opinion very, very much in those.
Thank you.
Could I ask a question? What is the difference? I know you said brick would be 70% more than concrete. What about the stamped red concrete in comparison to just straight concrete?
Now, I'm sorry, that was what I was referring to. The stamped red concrete. Oh, well, actually, the brick is about just doing the bricked sidewalks is about 70% more. I'd say just the stamped concrete is on the line of more of around 40 to 50% more in cost. So there is some reduction there. But I think you still get a lot of the same look, and you don't have quite as much of a maintenance problem as you do with the bricks. Previous to here, I was over construction for the city of Nashville and built many brick sidewalks in downtown, the Germantown area, and all over. So I'm a big fan of brick sidewalks as far as the look. I turned that job over to the street department when I got through constructing them for Nashville, so I wasn't as big of a fan as far as the actual maintenance of them. We found, and even in the plazas, or the plaza out here in front of City Hall, we fought those. Now, those are actually just concrete pavers. Those aren't bricks, but we fought those pavers anytime you have any type of equipment or really do any type of maintenance work up on the plaza. We have trouble with those becoming uneven. And now they've improved the paver system since those have been constructed. So there's pavers out there that would work. It just gets back to being able to being cost efficient with whatever we choose. And again, the stamped concrete seems to be a little bit more cost efficient, and also seems to give us a little bit better. A little bit better use wear over a longer period of time.
Well, and I think maybe the point that Mr. Becker was making was, of course, there's going to be maintenance forever. And so when it comes time to do another section in the historic district, if we could start with this block on Highland with the stamped dyed concrete, then maybe that's what we could do in the future when blocks of sidewalk have to be replaced in the historic district. So we could, as you said, get back to the original look.
And not to give my friend Mr. Lewis more work than what he wants to do, but you do get into a little bit of making sure that we have the Main Street street template as far as some of the concrete and street trees and some of the decorative lights that's called out for that would cross through, if I'm not mistaken, part of this area. We may want to do a little bit of work as far as coming up with an overall plan for the historic area, and we'd be certainly happy to look at that plan and to put some actual cost numbers to it, and to see if it's something that's feasible for us to complete.
I think the continuity, I'm worried about that. There's concrete sidewalks, I think, in front of White's house, and this is going to join that. And so I think we need to set some, if we're going to do this, set some comprehensive plan so we can figure out exactly what the city's willing to do. I don't know that I agree with Mr. Becker. I love the idea of doing that stamped concrete. I think it'll look really nice, but unless we have some master plan about how we're going to replace these and when they're going to be replaced, we may end up with one strip of stamped concrete and then just the old gray concrete for a long time, because concrete is going to crack, but it's a pretty strong product and stays there a long time.
I think another question is which sidewalks were brick historically. I don't know that every single sidewalk was brick. There may have been dirt paths at one point, and brick, and the first sidewalk could have been concrete. I think that would be a question for it may be in the National Register nomination, or there might be some information, an inventory that's been done that would show where brick sidewalks were probably in the latter part of the 19th century or early 20th.
I have a question. I'm having a tough time visualizing what the red stamped concrete would look like. Is that what you're speaking about? Mm-hmm. And then, but I really can't visualize it or think where it's used.
Well, it's used on the avenue. Mm-hmm. All that, it looks like red brick, but that's the stamped red brick. Also at the university, where the new parking area is off of Rutherford Boulevard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Crosswalks downtown.
Yeah.
And then the crosswalks downtown.
Yeah.
Well,
the same thing.
But the crosswalks downtown are individual concrete pavers dyed a brick color. They're not stamped. They're individual tiles.
Yes. The crosswalks downtown, they're laid in a concrete trough, if you will, and then they actually are
individual.
The brick pavers. Yes, those
they're
are
actually brick pavers, but they're really concrete.
But wouldn't it look pretty similar? as far as the
It
look
very
is
similar.
concerned.
And if I can, I don't know how well this, but if I can get them to bring the screen, my presentation back up, I'll kind of jump ahead to my next. There we go. This may not be, well, it's not going, you're not going to be able to tell it as much, but this here is in the plaza side, right beside where the pedestrian pole is. It's kind of white because of just because probably of salt that's been put on here recently, but it really looks. If you drive down the road and you look at that's the stamped concrete that you see there. Now out in the street, which is the stamped asphalt. If you drive down the road, or really if you walk on them, you really have to look. I think Mr. Lewis, whenever he was gracious enough to take these pictures for me, you really have to look to notice that those aren't actual individual bricks in there or individually laid. Let me see if I can find a little bit better. I'm getting into my next presentation, but and that's the stamped plazas there. Probably not as clear as what I'd want it to be, but if you look at what we've done, and then if you go down to now this is in front of the conference center. If you go down to the avenues, now they actually use pavers in there. I doubt that you'd be able to see or be able to tell much of a difference at all in between the two. These, and again, the reason why we use these, they seem to last longer and don't require as much maintenance.
The stamped asphalt, is that colored after it's stamped? Is it painted?
Yes, exactly.
So it may wear out if we were to put that on from foot traffic, like these crosswalks on Middle Tennessee Boulevard. I've been waiting for them to do it because I travel it every day. I keep waiting to see wear traffic on it. I haven't seen it yet, to be honest with you. But I do wonder if we put these on sidewalks, will they eventually have to be maintained the color?
They would. It's a little bit more. It's a little more obvious or a little bit more necessary if it's in say if we painted the plaza out here. Yeah. I think you would notice more the differences in the color. We made did a couple of stamped crossings on some highways. One was Iron Gate out near the Kroger's. We wanted to make a delineation. We were going from a commercial area to a residential. We stamped that. I go by and check on that from time to time. In Kings Ridge, we did the same thing back behind the elementary schools, or the elementary school at Siegel Elementary and Siegel Middle School. We stamp those. So we check on those. Now, certainly they're not maintenance free. They're going to require some sort of, what I've found is that in straightaways that they tend to work better if they're not in turning movements where the tire actually rubs on it. We traveled to Clarksville last summer, and they had done a nice intersection, Austin P, their main intersection there. But he said after a year it looks horrible, and it looked pretty bad whenever we were there because so many people are turning on it. But as long as you go straight, which is what you're doing for the most part in these, you go straight and then turn once you get out into the intersection, they're not as much of a problem.
But if you did stamped concrete instead, would the color be integral, or would it be, again, stained or painted?
Yeah, both. You can do it either way. Matter of fact, we've done it. We've done it both ways. If you ask the contractor, they would rather stamp it, or they would rather add the color once it actually gets to the site, because then they can control the color. They're adding just it's almost just a powder. That surface powder that goes to it. I keep doing that, but it's funny, they almost just fling it on there. It's just a big dust cloud that goes. And if you remember the transfer station for Rover that we constructed back, it was behind the Murfreesboro Housing Authority. We constructed that. That's all red concrete as far as the pedestrian area. We wanted to make a difference between the pedestrian and the bus area other than just the grade difference. I personally would prefer, and you're going to get back to the maintenance, or I'm going to get back to the maintenance issue, I would prefer if it's all the same color, like the concrete's all the same color. Basically, if it chips, if it busts out, if you have to cut a hole in it or anything like that, then it's red, gray, black, whatever the color is on the surface, it's that color all the way through, other than, what the light has done to it or any discoloration. So I would prefer that, but at this point, we've allowed them to do it either way.
You said you prefer it to be integral color?
Yes.
Yes, instead of applied.
Yes.
I would too.
Yes. The good thing about the asphalt adding the color to the surface is I could literally go out and do any street in the city. Just because it's a process where you actually heat the asphalt up to bring the oil to the surface, you get it kind of soft, and then you actually, it's almost, it's just a grid that you put down, and they stamp it into the grid, and then they come back in and color it after the fact. And we can look at the pictures here. It offers, doing it that way does offer the ability to do some pretty intricate work as far as some of it red, outlined in gray, and some of the just some of the contrast that you would like to see.
And it's my understanding with the stamped concrete, you can have a basket weave, a herringbone,
Yes.
a running bond, or anything, and we perhaps could match what we already have in the district that's remaining to match that bond of brick if we so chose to do that. But you're coming today, and perhaps we should have done the whole business completely backward, because I'm sort of out of step that you're going to be presenting the Manny Avenue. So the city's decided to spend dollars designing this approach, but one has not been started or completed on East Main's district?
I'm sorry, I didn't
The point is that you have, the city has paid to have designed the Manny plans, sidewalks and streetscape and this kind of thing, but is it true then we haven't really finished or started the one on East Main?
That's correct. This is really, this is a marriage of two projects that's came out of necessity. We have, and I'm sure most of y'all read the paper this weekend, on Sunday's article that Mr. Broden wrote, and I appreciate Mr. Webley being here today as an actual business owner out in that area. We've had drainage problems in the Manny Avenue area for quite some time, and we started looking at the construction of the drainage improvements and saw that it was really just going to be a complete makeover to the area. It's a 20-foot deep drainage system that'll extend all the way over to the Murphy Springs, to the wetland, reconstruction of a trash rack on that side of Broad Street. And in doing that, of course, we had the Planning and Engineering Department had completed the Manny Avenue community, the comprehensive community plan back in 2003. So we saw the need for the drainage and saw the need for actual street improvements that we felt like that we could do as part, because we're going to blow the right of way up. Why not go ahead and fix it back according to these plans? And so we saw the opportunity to complete. And I think Mr. Weatherly will tell you the drainage system's probably been in need of addressing for some time now, and I appreciate his and some other folks' input to the project out there. That's given us a lot of insight, a lot of efforts by the street department to provide maintenance work on the drainage system, but at some point it's just it goes beyond repair, and we need to replace it.
When should we expect to see a plan for the streetscape for the East Main corridor?
Go ahead, Robert. I think I was interrupting you.
We haven't looked at it yet.
Okay.
That's something that I think we'll probably have to decide when and where, and have some sessions on it.
Okay.
My concern, Mr. Chairman, is the length of time that this plan might come into effect. And the Manny Avenue plan has been since 2003, and we're in 2010, 7 years later. I'd like to address Mr. Wilson's concern about the lack of continuity. It seems to me the city over the years, over the last 20, 25 years, has replaced red brick with continuity without the concern of continuity. And so sort of this suggestion is in reverse. We still have a lack of continuity, but even if they came up with a plan to have every sidewalk torn up at the same time and then put whatever was decided on down, I think is a far reach. So I'm not too concerned about the lack of continuity since we've had that in place since I've been in town. Maybe Mr. Roberts, Mr. Jim Roberts, is in the audience. He could tell us what the red brick, the current concrete sidewalks in East Main, were they originally red brick? Or am I taxing your memory too far?
They were not.
Why don't you come up to the
If you would step up to the podium, please, and give us your name. And
don't mean to put you on the spot, but we'll take advantage of your knowledge.
I didn't come to speak. I came to listen. Ask the question.
The sidewalks that are concrete now in front of the house you grew up on, were they originally red brick?
No. Well, yes. In fact, I lived with my grandmother there, and she bragged forever that we had the first concrete sidewalk in Rutherford County. And she was really proud of it. The brick she did not like. And they took the sidewalk up about 5 or 10 years ago. I don't know how. Anybody know how long ago?
That's before about
15 years ago. And the brick that they had there was down in the hole. We went and looked at it, and they had put the concrete on top of it. Then they put it on top of it again. So they were really happy to get out of it. Somebody mentioned dirt paths. That goes a little past me. I don't know about dirt paths. But I don't believe we've taken up many brick sidewalks on Main Street since I've been around. 1902 they took up the one in front of your house. And I don't know of any others. Got another question?
No, that's it. Thanks.
I know she was really happy that they cut out on the liability of those bricks on that sidewalk. They liked the concrete a bunch better, much better. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
what additional questions does the commission have of Mr. Griffin?
I think I just have a comment it seems to me that we can make a lot of recommendations on what we want, but it's a matter of probably dollars. Mm-hmm. And I don't know what the city's prepared to do. So, Mr. Griffith, we're suggesting that, or some of us are suggesting that you do the stamped concrete there, but this project's slated to begin Monday, isn't it?
It's currently, and it's a maintenance schedule, and it's I think it's 1,200 or 1,300 square feet. So it's certainly, if there was something that was under consideration that are considerations that need to be made, we could adjust that schedule. I know Mr. Lewis is. We sometimes refer to him as a Superman. I doubt he could do an entire streetscape plan for the historic district before, even within the next 2 to 3 weeks, next 2 to 3 months probably. But this is such a minor section, like I said, 1,300 square feet. I think that, I forget how many linear feet that comes out to be, but I don't know that we'd necessarily be going backwards. And this, again, is also on the Highlands, not even in the actual Manny stretch. On the Main Street stretch. I don't know if we would be going backwards if we move forward with this replacement. And then, if the planners or Mr. Lewis would want to undertake looking at some sort of streetscape plan for the entire area, I think we can certainly do that here forward.
Well, I guess I'm trying to figure out how we get from a suggestion or recommendation that we do something to the point where we have funding in place to do what we're recommending.
I think it would come as a request, and maybe Mr. McGannon could, if I speak out of turn, but it would come as a request to the city manager, and that a study would be done to actually come up with a streetscape plan. It may be something that we could even complete in-house now. I know we're working on a streetscape plans in some other areas. I believe the city manager will be taking to council the request to do one for the Broad Street area. And so I think that would be, certainly if the chairman and this commission made that request, I think that would be heard.
So are you saying do you feel comfortable leaving this sidewalk in its current state while we debate this, or do you want to go ahead and repair that with just regular concrete?
I would prefer to go ahead and repair it with regular concrete. Just looking at the pictures and the condition that it's in now, and it's such a small stretch, I'd like to go ahead and get this one. And again, since it's on the Highland side, and not sure, even if you do a Main Street plan, how you wouldn't want to. I'm not sure that you'd want to go down all the side streets and address them in a similar situation. The outline of the historic, just trying to look at this from a common sense, the outline of the historic zone is a little jagged, and I think that you would probably want to go through with maybe on just Main Street and then just take it around to the radius return and then do something different from and match those up with the side streets from there.
We have approximately, I think it's 5 remaining sections of brick, one on East Main and 2 others on the street north of that. And then there's one on the corner that has a yellow house that has it both on the main street and the side street. So the side streets in that example does have brick pavers on it. So we did have brick pavers on side streets, just as a reminder to the board. So there is an example that remains that we've asked the city not to pick up and remove until this is resolved. So I hear what you're saying about maybe it's just the East Main, but I'd just like to let the commission know that there is a side street with brick pavers on it.
And my engineering continuity, I like to see everything in pattern and order and stuff, and so that was the reason why I suggested maybe just going around the radius return. We've actually got about, if I'm not mistaken, in addition to the 5 that you mentioned, we have about 8 more, which would make about 13 in total. That's even outside the historic area that we've identified. We've noted their condition, but just to concur with what you've said, Mr. Thompson, we do not have any plans to replace any of those at this time, any of the 13.
I'd rather see pavers as accents and bricks as accents as a part of whatever the Main Street plan coming down would be, instead of on the side streets. I agree with Mr. Wilson about, he wasn't necessarily, he was just saying for continuity reasons, but you've got the concrete and then you turn the corner, and I just think it would look better, be better. And I'd rather see the accents come in the bigger plan with the street lights and things like that. That's just my opinion.
Any further discussion?
Well, and along that line, I think we have to decide what's achievable, given the financial condition that the city's under right now. And do we want to see something done on Main Street and get a good job done there with the money we have versus some of these side streets? So.
And I think we've undertaken the city on several different and looked at several different funding sources. Spring Street's a good example. We've rebuilt that, I think, in 3 to 4 different projects, and basically as we set what we wanted the look to be through there, and then we've rebuilt sections of it. Certainly in the downtown area where we're laid out in a grid pattern that allows that to happen. And it may look a little funny at first, just because you're driving down and it looks all the same, and you seem like you go right into a different type of area. But we recently completed the Spring Street project. We've done some work on State in rebuilding sections of it. And actually rebuilt a little section of Main Street after some underground utilities were finished with their work. So it's the good thing about all of that is with the grid pattern downtown and with the construction and with the detouring traffic and what have you, it allows us to do things in sections. I just think it would be something that maybe Mr. Adelot and Mr. Lewis and Ms. Logan and some of the planners that they have, it would be something they would need to tackle. I think the last thing you would want is an engineer coming up with the look of something.
Ms. McGannon?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I did want to just support Mr. Griffith's suggestion that the concrete work probably needed to be done now as a matter of safety. But also Mr. Wilson's comment, I think it would be entirely appropriate if the commission wished to, apart from this specific issue, pass a motion or get a consensus to ask the city manager and the planning director to come up with a streetscape plan for the historic district. One of the items that could be included in that plan would be not only what the elements should be and looking at samples of the various kinds of bricks that have been talked about, but also what the scope should be in terms of whether or not the priority should be for Main Street or College or, the expanding where the existing brick is. I think that would all be the sort of thing that you would want to have done in a study, whether that's done with the internal expertise or an outside consultant. But I don't know that it hurts to ask. You may not get, but if you don't ask, you don't get.
Thank you. Any further discussion by the commission?
My only comment is that our role here is to comment. And I think we've commented. My own comment would be that I tend to agree with Mr. Griffith that the nature of the situation is such that, and having walked that sidewalk myself, or tripped down that sidewalk myself, that it would be good to proceed with doing that, but that's just a comment. I have no objection to it personally, and as a member of this commission, I have no problem with it proceeding as designed.
Any further discussion? Is there a form of a motion that would like to be made regarding this particular issue? Which, as a board, a commission, we would like to send to the city as a vote? A motion?
I'd be happy to move that the commission has no objection to the project proceeding as designed.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor of the city then proceeding with replacing the existing concrete sidewalk with a new concrete sidewalk, please say aye. 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 Those opposed? Then our recommendation to the city is to proceed forward with the concrete sidewalk. Is there a form of a motion then to have the city prepare a planning document for the streetscapes of the East Main Historic District?
Well, I guess I would move that, and I guess this will be probably to the planning commission or planning staff, that we would request, recommend that they do a study to determine not the infrastructure, they do a study to determine the streetscape to include sidewalks, renovations, signage in the, you want to say the whole historic district, or just the Main Street corridor? What's the?
I would say, so that we don't have similar issues to this side street, is that it be the entire East Main Historic District. And then their decision may be that they come back and tell us that all side streets are going to be concrete, but all main streets are going to be brick and concrete or something. But let them come back with the language that designs the approach that makes the whole entity of the district be cohesive.
That would be my motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Then we send a recommendation that the city prepare design guidelines for the East Main Historic District streetscape. And we have a third bit of business. Robert?
Yes, sir. While Mr. Griffith's still hot here, we can proceed with the implementation of the Manny Avenue plan, and we've talked a little bit about it already. What the city is proposing is to provide some streetscape, some structure, some beautification to Manny Avenue, and this particular section is going to begin on Broad Street, Northwest Broad Street, and it will terminate on East College Street. And part of it goes through the Historic Commission. Mr. Griffith has some boards and some photographs of what he's proposed, and he knows more details about it than I do. He's been involved in it for quite a while. And I'll just give you back to Mr. Griffith.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Planning and Engineering Department is currently in the design stage of proposed road and drainage improvements to Manny Avenue from Broad Street to College Street. Will add that this will eventually continue on to the Oakland's Mansion. This is the first phase of the project, and really this is the phase of the project from a drainage standpoint that is the most critical to us to move forward with. As you're aware, a section of the area which will be improved is located within the East Main Street historic area. I've included a map indicating the proposed improved area, and which is with the historic area shaded above it. Our consultant, Hudson Steel, has completed the initial plans with streetscape improvements, which include the following: landscaping with street trees and sodded grass strips, stamped asphalt crosswalks, which are intended to be red brick in color, stamped concrete plaza areas, which will also be red brick in color, defined on-street parking using porous pavers, decorative street lighting with black cast aluminum poles with the acorn fixture, handicap ramps with black truncated domes, and lastly, underground mainline utilities. Many of the proposed improvements are outlined in the Manny Avenue Comprehensive Community Plan dated September of 2003, which I mentioned previously. Staff is still in the design stage of this project. Our current plans are to proceed with a public meeting within the next couple of weeks to obtain further public input. We have met with concerned citizens already to date, and feel like we've gotten some valuable information from them, and want to continue that process. After completion of the design stage, we will then proceed with obtaining necessary easements to complete the project. Our current plans are to do most of the work in the existing right-of-way, but we will proceed a little outside the right-of-way for some of the large drainage trunk lines that will have to be run with the project. We anticipate obtaining the easements, advertising for construction, awarding the construction contract, and beginning construction by late spring or early summer of this year. The anticipated construction schedule is a little over a year in duration, and we put the completion of the project by early fall of 2011. And I've got a couple of boards here. If I can go to. This is on. Yeah. I'm going to hand you this one to kind of look, maybe go around. It's very small. I apologize that it's hard to get the entire, but that is the entire route. And you see here, basically this here is the normal paving area. This dark gray, this would basically just be the through lanes. You see we do have the red brick colored pavers. This is what I refer to as the porous pavers. This is something new in the industry to us. I think this will be the third location that we've used it in Murfreesboro. It's something the MTSU, their concrete program, is very much involved in. Matter of fact, Dr. Heather Brown has just recently completed a project at one of their parking areas using these porous pavers, and they're remarkable in nature in that they just take a. I've seen fire hydrants just turned on full blast, and it would be able to absorb all the water with little to no runoff in these paved areas. Now this is where the on-street parking itself would be. So what you're looking at is basically 10, 11, 12 feet wide here. It's got a concrete band on the outside and then a concrete band. Well, this is actually the curb and gutter portion of the roadway here on the inside. We do have, as we mentioned, this will be the stamped concrete pavers, stamped concrete plazas that we have planned for it. This is just a normal concrete handicap ramp. We are using the black truncated domes. I don't know if you've noticed those on the latest. It's really for folks that are sight impaired. It's a different feel or a different texture of the street to let you know that you're going from from a pedestrian-friendly area to maybe a car area or a non-pedestrian-friendly area. But it's to give the folks the warning that they're changing different types of area. If we have these planters every so often, sometimes 2-car lengths, sometimes 3-car lengths. It's shown in the overall plan. But basically, you're looking at an ornamental tree here, something that we've looked at, and I believe the landscape design architects called out crepe myrtles in some of the single stem. We're looking at something that'll add some color and add some greenery, but at the same time, we'll certainly we want this to be a pedestrian-friendly area, but it won't reduce the sight distance. So as people crossing the street or what have you, it would still be visible. The car would be visible to the pedestrian, and vice versa. So it's something that we're certainly concerned about. And I've got I think this is it for this portion. I've got some slides also that I want to show. Some examples. If we can get the overhead back up. Yes. This is some of the slides that we'd looked at before. You can see the black ornamental poles. We'll be using this not only on the street lighting and the pedestrian crossings, the PED signals, but we'll be using this for actual street signs. And I've got some examples of this later. But this is an example of the concrete plaza. That's all concrete, as we mentioned previously. It's just stamped in there as it's being constructed. And then we've also got the handicap ramps. And if you'll notice in the handicap ramp itself, the red area within it, that's the truncated domes. It's added. It's just added onto the handicap ramp, and that gives, like I'd mentioned, a sight impaired pedestrian the ability to know that they're switching from a sidewalk area to a street crossing. Going through some of these strides. This is the decorative signs that I'd mentioned. Basically, it's a black black cast aluminum pole, and just a regular MUTCD sign would actually slide down into a brace, if you will, and those have worked well for us. The street department is able to keep those in stock. I know a lot of times we'll get into to brands that we're not familiar with, or brands that there's several different makers of this type of equipment. But this particular one we've been able to keep in stock, and so if we have one knocked down, it's not a 6-month ordeal having to order them and get them back in. Here's some of the decorative street lighting. If you see that on the, just some of the detail, just again the black cast aluminum with the acorn there on top. We found this to be very beneficial in providing light, but at the same time not being too intrusive into the surrounding area. Again, this is the stamped concrete plazas. You can also get a little bit, and maybe on, yeah. Oops. You can see this is the asphalt crosswalk, and you can see some of the different things that you can do with it as far as the red stamped asphalt going to the dark gray stamped asphalt, and then just the regular road itself. And so that's that's something that's actually it's a little unique to the stamped asphalt, and it gives us a little bit more flexibility with doing different things with the color. And I think that's it. As we mentioned, we're still early in this process. We're still, our plans are to have a meeting at the Methodist Church there on Manny Avenue sometime within the next couple of weeks. But since this obviously included some of the historic district, we certainly wanted to bring this to you and to allow y'all to see it and to comment on it. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
What questions does the board have of Mr. Griffith?
I have two, Mr. Griffith. When you were talking about the porous pavers, you said you've already used those in 3 other locations. Could you tell us so we could go see those?
Whether it's actually this will be the 3rd location that they'll be used in. The place that they're actually been constructed and are physically there now is at the MTSU campus. I'll have to get you the name of they did it in a parking lot.
Off Rutherford?
No, that was a stamped, or not a stamped, that was a porous concrete. That was where the concrete itself had openings and voids in it and allowed water in. That's a good product. We feel like that this product will operate a little bit better over an extended period of time. And these are actually just pavers, different shapes and different form that the water actually goes in the grooves between the pavers, and they're filled up with a finer stone. And I know I was hesitant to really go along with that they would be that useful and would hold up over time. We have went to traveled to Chicago last spring, I believe, and saw some areas where they've been in place 5 to 10 years, and really didn't see the first maintenance problem with any of them. I can get you the name of the building at MTSU that they're in front of. The other location is actually a developer here, Joe Swanson Jr., is going for his LEED certification on a development there on Thompson that backs up to the hospital, to the new hospital that's being constructed. And he is using his entire parking lot will be porous pavers. Now that hasn't been constructed yet, but it should be constructed just within the next couple of months.
Okay. I have one more question.
Okay.
in the map you provided for us in our packet, we're talking about the Manny Avenue section, and I know, since I live in that area, I know that one of the intersections, one of the sidewalk areas that we're concerned about, where it's brick facing Manny Avenue and College, and if that's going to be part of the Manny Avenue renovation.
If it's on the Manny Avenue side, it currently is planned to be part of the project.
I guess my point is, we're talking about not
Sure.
tearing up any more brick sidewalks in the near future.
And I understand that. I think that would be something, and again, we're not looking to go construction on this for a few months now, but I think that would be something that we'd want to address before we move forward with actual demolition or reconstruction of it. Absolutely.
Any further questions? Yes.
I have a question. The light fixtures, while they're very attractive, and maybe I didn't understand in the picture, but the globe itself is glass all the way around. Have you all considered one that had a cap on it so as not to add to additional night light pollution, where all the light went down rather than shooting half the light up into the sky?
We actually, with the, and I don't want to say that this particular one that I showed you has that, but we have used those, especially on the Gateway Trail area. It's got the little globe that actually fits inside over the light, and certainly that's something that's available from our manufacturer, or the manufacturer that does most of this type fixture. And I think that's really becoming almost, we understand with light pollution in neighborhoods and something it's almost a standard add-on to these lights now. I don't know, just because this was in a commercial area, that this one has it, but I can tell you that in other residential areas we've used that.
Chris, one question. The map shows the Main Street Historic District portion of the project, which is what we should be concerned with. Can you tell me what other areas that are outside the blue hatched marked area are included in this?
Yes, absolutely, Mr. Cross. It goes all the way to Broad. The limits of the project will be Broad Street to College Street for this first phase. Now, as you go down, and I didn't provide you a map with there is. Let's see if it's in here.
One in your package. This is what you're talking about.
I don't have my package. Sorry.
Yeah, this one.
Well, I've got that, but I don't have.
It goes all the way down to Broad Street, and I think
There's two maps in there. Oh.
Mr. Cross, when it gets to now, the improvements, the actual roadway improvements, will go all the way to Broad and Manny. Now, at East Castle Street, we will deviate, or we will move away from the Manny section, and the reason being that's the easiest route in order to get the drainage in. And again, you're talking 15 to 20 foot deep drainage system, a fairly large drainage system too, if I'm not mistaken, around 48. Well, actually, it's probably a 36-inch pipe at this location. And then we'll actually bore under Broad Street, just off of Castle Street there, and that will make the connection to the wetlands at Murphy Springs. So it does deviate from just the Manny Avenue corridor, but mostly for the drainage improvements. For the most part, as far as for the streetscape improvements, we tend to just go to the radius return and then end right in that immediate area. Or in this instance, we'll finish out the property and then end it.
So you're asking for our approval relative to the nature of the improvements that you want to make inside the historic district?
I would, and obviously any input that you might. We've worked on this for some time. It's been a difficult project from an engineering standpoint, and we've worked on this some time from an aesthetics and from a streetscape standpoint. I'm sure Mr. Weatherly wished that we got started 10 years ago, but we are still in the formulating ideals and getting information. So if there's something that you'd like to see added to it, I'd appreciate any input that you might have.
I'm simply going to make the statement that I appreciate and approve of the improvements that are being recommended. I think they've been well thought out. I am concerned that there's a great deal of this city that's deserves a higher level of regulation because it has less regulation than new subdivision has. And I personally am going to be coming to this commission and be asking this commission to add areas to the historic district zone. Areas that you're going into, you think that the administration thinks enough of these areas to take these improvements into these areas. And I think that they should be brought into the historic district zone so that the overall development in those zones can be better regulated in terms of new construction and design and the feel and things that are being done inside there. And I applaud the effort that's gone into this. I just want to see more of it, and I'm going to, as a member of this commission, begin to make motions and moves forward to increase the area that would fall under the purview of the review of this Historic Zoning Commission.
Thank you. Mr. Backlund, you had some comments?
Yeah, I appreciate the efforts you've made to improve Manny Avenue. I remember going to some of the public meetings some years ago. I didn't realize it was 7 years ago, but happy to see that it's coming about, and I really think it'll help improve the heart of downtown. Just a couple of questions or comments. One would be about the drainage into the wetland. Is there some way to ensure that that trash is filtered out? I know that's been a problem with some of the existing runoff into the wetland.
You're exactly right, Mr. Backlund. We actually are building a new trash screen, a larger trash screen, since the existing trash screen only serves I think a 24-inch pipe, and if I'm not mistaken, we're going up to a 48-inch pipe, and we'll certainly want to improve that. And then the porous pavers themselves that lead into that actually are known to filter out a lot of the debris, a lot of the actual bituminous, the asphalt material, the oils that are trapped in there. So we'll be requesting funding from the Murfreesboro Water and Sewer Department to fund part of the project, because we feel like it is such a needed improvement to the quality of the stormwater in that area, and specifically that flows into the Murphy Spring wetland.
Then my other comment would be to, when you consider landscaping materials, that you try to determine or use those that are least invasive. There are some species that we use typically in landscaping that have become real serious problems in natural areas, including Bradford pear, Nandina, and a botanist recently told me that crepe myrtles are becoming a problem as well.
Mr. Becker?
I'm sure when that article came in the paper, Chris, you heard a loud chorus of cheers from any of us that have been involved in the original Manny Avenue Comprehensive Plan. I really appreciate to see this project coming to fruition. And one question I have is regarding the underground mainline utilities. Will this afford the homeowners and business owners along this corridor to have underground utilities into their properties?
Right now, our plan is to actually to have underground utilities just along the main line. Now, if it's something, and our reasoning for that, this came up also on our Middle Tennessee Boulevard improvements between Main Street and Mercury. We started looking into moving all the utilities underground, including the service lines, which is essentially, Mr. Peck, what you're speaking about. We were afraid that we didn't feel like the city could go in and make those improvements, those private improvements to the residents, and we didn't want to put an undue cost on the residents themselves. Now, if it's something that if the city or if the homeowner wants to work in conjunction with the city, we will have all the necessary equipment as far as with the pad-mounted transformers, with the telephone boxes, with the cable boxes. Those will be pad-mounted actually in an easement that we're going to obtain. And the way we've got those spaced out is every other lot. So basically each grouping would serve two houses. If there's a homeowner that would like to run conduit out and change off his services out that's currently in his house, or the service that's in his house to underground, we wouldn't be opposed to that. We didn't feel like we wanted to force people to do it and put an expense on them, a few $1,000s to do all that. And we thought that we could, or we feel like that we've gotten a good look down Middle Tennessee Boulevard in that Main to Mercury stretch, and we feel like that this we can gain the same look at this area.
So would the property owner then work with the city if they wish to have it connected to?
Sure. Yes, absolutely. It wouldn't be any problem at all. It would, matter of fact, it would probably be easier. The way we do it is we put all the necessary ground-mounted equipment there, and then we basically just have a service utility pole and just run it up the pole. And so instead of running it up the pole, they'd be just to be able to run it to their residents.
I'm just thinking of all the future ice storms.
Oh yeah. Well, and you're exactly right. And not only ice storms, the tornadoes. We had a lot more success out of underground utilities that hit the tornado hit on April 10th. So it's they do offer a lot of improvement.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any additional questions? I would like to ask a question, too. It's interesting the Manny Avenue plan has the brick pavers instead of the pedestrians for the cars. It'll be under the cars where they're parked.
You're talking about the porous pavers?
Yes.
It is. That's
it's just the reverse of what we've been thinking about East Main.
It is, and these are a lot more heavy-duty pavers. Yes. They also have, if I can go back to go a little bit more into the construction of them. This is actually a detail of the pavers, and if you'll see, we go actually to we go actually 2 feet below with a shot rock pad, and then we come up with smaller stone until we get to the actual small stone that the pavers are set on. So this is an entire structural component, if you will. It's right now the main problem with it is getting the cost down in order to make it affordable to construct it. Because I'll be honest with you, from an engineering standpoint, I would love to see nothing better than this built everywhere for every parking lot in the city. But it's really it's not really feasible to do this. But this is such a critical drainage area to us, and an area that's had drainage problems in the past. And also, as Mr. Backlund had mentioned, it leads to the Murphy Springs. That we saw this as just and I'll give credit to Miss Shannon Logan. She's the one that came up with the ideal, and came up with most of the good ideas that's on this. But we felt like that it was something that was certainly warranted at this particular location. But and that's a good point, Mr. Thompson. It is exactly backwards of what we've said, and I guess just to show that everything has its, they're a little bit larger pavers. I haven't seen them used that much in sidewalk areas. Even when we were in Chicago, it was almost strictly parking lots, and I actually saw one street that was completely constructed with it. Same thing, it was an area that flooded constantly. These are really used in areas, either one that's wanting to get their LEED certification, because obviously some, I'm sure you realize this, but some businesses aren't moving into to buildings unless they're LEED certified. This is something that's relatively easy and not as much maintenance to have that done. And then also the areas that are prone to drainage problems.
We earlier today talked about the other stretch of sidewalk on South Highland being concrete. We discussed that maybe the side streets would not have brick pavers, but can you then, based on this scheme, which has brick pavers, if you will, concrete pavers for the cars, this would be a side street, that stretch from East Vine to East College, a side street to the East Main District. So could you perhaps describe then what is the exact nature of the improvements of East Main within the historic district? You may need the other drawing that showed the various street vignettes, but I think it's important for us as a commission to understand what the improvements are in the East Main District.
Sure. For the most part, we're talking about the College Street and the Main Street intersection.
Well, since the district almost covers all the way up to Vine on East, from East College to East Vine on Manning, just assume that whole stretch is within the district, though a portion of it is not per the map. What are the improvements then from College to Vine on Manning? If you could show us on that drawing.
If you'll look at the match lines, and basically this is Broad Street, and then the match line for this would go here. So you would go Broad, Castle, State, Sevier, and then really Vine Street is where we get near the historic district. And again, you're looking at the stamped concrete plaza areas. You'll be looking at the stamped asphalt crosswalks You can see that we have landscaping planned. We still have some of the on-street parking here. Now, as you go further into the historic area, and by the time you get to Main Street, you start to lose some of your width, and you gain the need for a left turn lane at Main Street in order to keep traffic moving, and so you actually lose some of the porous pavers. Now you still have and you at the same time you lose some of the landscaping. Now at this point, you go back to you still obviously have the decorative lighting, the decorative street signs, the decorative poles as far as the signals there, and then you'll be looking at more the plaza areas because again trying to stay within the existing right-of-way. So we're not pushing up into obviously the older area that the houses are built closer to the road in many instances. You want to avoid actually taking right of way and pushing that out. So you're getting more into just doing improvements at the plaza, and again, as I mentioned, I think the stamped asphalt. Now, as you go further to College Street, you have a little bit of on-street parking in here that's just striped. It really doesn't. It's so removed from this area. It didn't really allow us to do the pavers effectively here. But we are able to pick up the landscaping again. You see the sodded areas here, the grass strip, the landscaping, and then same thing with the plaza areas. This shows it stopping at College and only half of it being completed. I think that's just obviously we'll do both sides of College there to make that intersection complete as part of this project. And then College at this time is where the project will stop. All up and down through here, as far as the street signs, the stop signs, the street names, all of that will be on decorative poles for the entire length. And again, this pretty much follows, and I was happy with our consultant Huddleston Steel. They followed pretty closely what the Manny Avenue plan had called out from a street use and a sidewalk use, and where we'd be able to have on-street parking. It's some folks I guess would like us to have on-street parking up and down the entire length, and then some folks would rather us not have any on-street parking. But it was something that was well planned out. Obviously, multiple public meetings that occurred to come up with this plan, and it was one that I think that they followed very effectively.
The point I bring this up is that by setting this design in motion, you're already sort of starting the vocabulary for the street improvements for East Main by running the Manny improvements all the way up to College. And so I guess the question is, I want the commission to see that we have brick pavers up to about where the district starts from Vine over to Main. About halfway down the road it stops, if what the brick pavers do, and then it goes to just the concrete sidewalks, but you then get the little touches of the brick pavers, if you would. I use that generically, brick pavers.
Sure.
At the intersection then of East Main and Manny, so that starts in motion a vocabulary, and you've got the street signs, you've got the street lights, you've got lights themselves, and then it's the stretch from East Main to College that is, within our district, that you see again the brick pavers at College. And so I want to make sure the commission sees that this is starting into our area and starting to establish a language. So if the next planning for the East Main district that the city commissions changes and says it's something else, we've got one street barreling through the district that may have a different design vocabulary. I doubt it.
And just so the red brick that you see here is the on-street parking, and what we've called out along this route
is the concrete sidewalk. It's a 6-foot concrete sidewalk, and then as we've come to each intersection, then we add the stamped concrete plazas.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to, I know it's such a small scale. You have on-street parking,
Sidewalk.
and
I'm not sure I have concerns about it, but I just wanted the commission to be sure they were aware of the fact that you're starting the language down into East Main on Manning with this project.
I agree, Chairman Thompson. It's a very good point.
Why would you do that?
Right now, most of the drainage system, we chose College because we felt like that it's not completely down to College, but most of our drainage problems and most of the drainage system in this area we felt like needed to be improved immediately, and so really basically for the sake of drainage is where we made a breaking point.
I can't see from here, but is there a grass strip between the road pavement and the sidewalk?
It is, when you see in the green areas here, there is a grass strip, and here there's not, where you see the gray right up with the red, and that's the reason why we added the street trees. Again, it's just competing for space without adding to the width of the roadway.
The landscaping and the parking would help slow traffic down and make the sidewalks more comfortable for people to use.
Yes, exactly. And the whole idea for this is to make it more pedestrian friendly, and we're even looking at steps further, and some of the meetings we've got coming up with the residents, we're interested in their input to making the whole area more pedestrian friendly.
Where does the commercial areas end and the residential start, such that is there parking outside the residential areas that maybe they would prefer to have grass instead of parking?
I know this up in here is it's kind of sporadic, to be honest with you, but it's I know this up in here is commercial, and I don't know if Robert or Mr. Lewis may know, but you have a lot of residential, and then you'll have just a couple of shots of so that we really, and I understand what your question is, to have some sort of theme through both of them, and the study, I think this was the best that the study could do as far as for the overall length.
There is a mixture of commercial from Broad Street up to Castle Street. I think on the right-hand side as you're going up is predominantly residential. On the left-hand side it's predominantly commercial. And once you get beyond Castle Street, it's on the right-hand side, I think it's predominantly commercial, and I think it's actually commercial on both sides of the street. And once you get a little farther north, up to Sevier Street, I think it's probably a mixture of residential. The church is on Manny on the left-hand side. There's more residential, I think, in there, but there's a mixture.
And the zoning is commercial in that entire street, or is it a combination? What is it?
On Manny, right around Broad Street, it's commercial highway, and I think it goes up to at least Castle Street, and I think it may even go up to State Street. I don't have a map in front of me with the zoning on it.
Well,
But
it's commercial all the way to Vine.
you're probably right. I mean, I think, I just can't recall right now, but I think it is.
By putting the parking in there on the street all the way there, you might be encouraging those residential houses to eventually disappear and become commercial properties by putting parking in the front. It's kind of strange to put paved parking in front of a residential area or lot, and it might, who knows how the city may change, but it's sort of that extra little step that may encourage commercialism and change of zoning.
Well, the Manny Avenue plan considered all this, and they took this into consideration, and you can have residential and commercial going side by side each other if it's done right.
In trying to make it more pedestrian-friendly, I don't know what the state law or city ordinance governs pedestrians and cars at intersections, but and maybe you can tell me, do cars have to yield to pedestrians, and if so, will the intersections be signed as such?
Signage would be manual and uniform traffic control devices. Because it is general state law, that would be an obligation without a sign. Certainly, I think that'll be looked at. I personally don't like to test that theory too often.
Right. Well, that's why I say if it's signed and it becomes a habit. And there are different kinds of yield to pedestrian signs available, and some are more effective than others, I think.
I think we've used that in locations. I think you noticed most areas on the square is yield to pedestrians. We've done that on roundabouts in town and in residential areas, a yield to pedestrian. But I agree with you, Mr. Backlund, there's some that's more effective than others.
Any further questions?
Don't we need a motion?
If there's no further discussion, is there a motion that the board would like to send to the city?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
if I can, assuming that you'll go forward, but I think you don't need a motion because, of course, you won't be approving or rejecting. You'd just be making comments. And I think probably those have been, noted as they've been made in terms of the invasive planting and the light caps to, avoid light pollution and whatnot. You may want to organize them. I didn't really hear any disagreement about the comments that were made. If there are areas of disagreement, it would probably be good to resolve that and take a formal comment. But it would be structured as input and comment.
Mm-hmm. I was just thinking of the area inside the historic district.
I do have a comment because I'm concerned about the intersection at Manny and College, which is kind of at the end of this first construction phase. I'm concerned about the existing brick sidewalks there. I'm concerned that they will be eliminated without any input from the neighbors or the residents, and that because they're so well maintained by the owner, I would hate to see happen what happened a few months ago by the city.
I would also like to express my concern about putting crepe myrtles in the historic district of East Main, because they're really not crepe myrtles lining any of the streets in general. There are a lot of oaks and other types of trees, but not crepe myrtles.
And those, as far as the landscaping, is still very preliminary. We're not that hung up on crepe myrtles ourselves. It's just a matter of finding something that works and still offers the the pedestrians the safety of not only from cars, but from maybe someone hiding in behind a bush or something like that. We certainly want everybody to feel safe and be able to enjoy the area.
Anybody else would like to make any comments? We do have some members from the audience. Do you wish to speak regarding this proposed thing at this time?
I yield my time, Mr. Chair.
Any additional comments then? If not, the chair would then welcome a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned.